Hello, everyone. Welcome back to just another F1 podcast here on the Apex Motorsport. My name is Richard Smyth, and this is season 5, episode 3. And pre-season testing is done, and the Bahrain Grand Prix is just around the corner. And joining me today to discuss it all is, of course, Ryan Caldwell. Ryan, testing, as I said, is over. First race of the season is only a matter of days away. Is the excitement starting to build ahead of the new season?
I think the whole of F1 Twitter would agree. Things are starting to heat up quite nicely. Testing is over. We've had a few shocks, few surprises, some not so surprises, as I'm pretty sure we're gonna cover in about 2 minutes' time. Overall, I'm ready. Drive to Survive dropped as well, which is also heating up the excitement. Everyone's getting a refresh from last year, getting excited for this year apart from the Max Verstappen stuff. But yeah, everything's starting to heat up, and I think we could be actually on for a semi interesting season for once.
Yeah, definitely hope that in terms of storylines this season will be much better than last. But Tesson told a similar story to last year in some extent because Red Bull looked to be once again the fastest team on the grid. Ferrari had a good test. They topped 2 days and had the overall fastest time, but the lap times that Red Bull were setting were just in terms like the long runs and the stats, the stuff that have come out, people have dissected on Twitter. They have been very, very impressive. Ryan, do you think this is just going to be another year of Red Bull dominance, or do you think, given that Ferrari had a decent test, they've shown signs of progress that Red Bull should win the championship in this year, but it might just not be winning all but one race this year?
Nah, nah. We all heard that first audio clip from that day. We all have seen and just admired how Red Bull have just miraculously pulled another feat of engineering out from their backside once again by Sir Adrian Newey. That's not even a sir, but should be at this point. And let's be honest, the competition is just going to be who can beat Max. It's not so much a who's going to be the top constructor this year, who's going to do this. It's going to be who can beat Max Verstappen. That's the benchmark. If you can beat Max straight off the bat, first race, because they did have a tiny reliability issue ever so slightly, whatever that was in testing. For Perez, of course, had to be him. Um, but if Red Bull do have struggles, there's plenty of opportunity for other teams, such as the Ferrari, who will need to somehow sort of impress this year to show that they're up for a fair game, especially for next year for Sir Lewis Hamilton coming in to 2025. So that'll be really interesting as well. I don't know. Are we at the point where we could see a green and black car of Stake F1 slash Kick F1 slash Stake F1, whatever it's going to be? I don't know. It's better than the Sport Pesa Formula One, BWT Racing, water. I don't know what the team was. But it's better than that. There's a chance that they could just magically do something. There's a chance that Haas could magically do something. We don't know. Testing, never read into testing. We don't believe testing. Testing's a pile of lies. But testing does allow us to create little things in our head where we hopefully get stories such as McLaren have won the first 10 races, which would be pretty special.
I mean, after the test that McLaren had, I would be pleasantly surprised if they were even getting any podiums the first 10 races of the season. I mean,
Sandbagging, man. Sandbagging.
yeah, well, it could be that. And obviously, as you said, testing, we don't really know. I think the main problem for McLaren was they had loads of reliability issues, which meant they weren't able to do as many laps as they really needed to do. Because, if we look back to last season, McLaren turned up to testing in the first few races of the season awful. Like, absolutely nowhere. And then Silverstone, they all of a sudden turned this around where they had a car that was challenging for double podiums, which is what I still maintain is one of the greatest turnarounds in a sporting season. Especially when
I was gonna say because
go ahead.
they were literally like the second slowest team at one point beside Williams. They were finishing like 17th and 18th, and I was like, what is going on at McLaren? Them sitting grabbing podiums literally the year before and struggling. They're like, I was so confused. I was like, has Mercedes customer teams really been throwing such a bad hand? But then obviously then Aston Martin took off like an absolute rocket ship. So I suppose you know.
Yeah, if you're looking at the amount of laps that teams completed, Williams were lowest with 289, with McLaren on 327. Well, Williams being my prediction for most laps turned out really well there, but yeah, McLaren, they got 129 on the first day, 97 on the second day, and 111 on the third day. And if you compare that to other teams around him, on day one, 129 wasn't the lowest. It was actually up there as some of the most. There's a couple of teams on 131, Haas on the most of 148. Then on the second day, they were the only team not to hit 100 laps, but Alpine only had 111, Williams 117. So you're not talking hundreds of laps more. And then on the third day, 111, Alpine only 102, Mercedes 116, Red Bull 119. So yeah, they didn't. I think the picture that's painted from McLaren was they had a really bad test where they didn't have enough laps and so many reliability issues where they were still able to pump out the lap times. And yes, they maybe long runs and the performance runs weren't quite there, but Ryan, do you think that potentially with this lack of lap times, or at least performance lap times, that they are just going to be starting the season right on the back foot?
Well, if we even take a look at last year, how they started off, they didn't even get to testing in time last year. Williams, I thought, would have taken a different direction and have really honed down at the start of last year and been all okay. We're gonna write this season off entirely. This is just as much investment as we can and build for next year. And whether no, I also said earlier, sandbagging. They could be heavily, heavily sandbagging here. But it's very unlikely. I just at this point you just feel bad for Williams because they deserve so much more. Such a historic name. It's actually devastating. But hopefully they can at least bring themselves up into some sort of midfield-ish battle. But the thing is, I would like to see it be top three teams and everyone midfield. So then we've got a proper championship battle on our hand instead of just everyone being, they're split almost four groups. It's like, here's the two fastest, here's the next three teams, here's the next three teams, and here's the two slow ones, which is usually Haas and Williams. Hopefully we see some development from Williams, and hopefully that they are sandbagging to at least be the sixth, seventh fastest car, maybe. If they're as we rated their liveries, if they were as fast as what we rated their liveries, well, they'd be doing pretty well. Yeah, Williams, what are you gonna do, boys? Go get them.
Do you think that given the amount of lap times in testing, there isn't a massive difference between, well, Williams are rock bottom under 300, but then above them, you've got Alpine and McLaren, two teams that have really struggled. Do you think that is looking like what could be the bottom three? Or do you think that this, even though Haas had the most laps, that the amount of laps completed doesn't necessarily mean you have the most reliable car? Because there's various things that happen, and Haas will definitely not be top. Based on pure lap times, Haas being top of that world champions.
Well, if we even just take a wee nosy here, just while you're talking about it, I've here's the fastest laps of Bahrain preseason testing per driver. The Williams comes in on the C4 tire as a 130.9. Now, you have also in the C4 Daniel Ricciardo in an RB and Yuki Tsunoda in an RB. Yuki Tsunoda is just above him by 0.2, and Daniel Ricciardo was slower by 0.4. So there is obviously that argument that there could be some sort of power time gain, but then again, it's all to do with tires, what sort of runs, high fuel, low fuel, different aero packages, testing. Nobody ever knows. Now that fastest day that was set for Albon was day 3, so pretty much last day of testing. Whereas those other 2 times for uh, Yuki's was also day 3, but Ricardo's was on day 2. So obviously everybody's running different packages, different times, different fuel runs, different power modes. It's a difficult one to even look at. Even Haas, Logan Sargent and Kevin Magnussen are half a second between each other, but obviously Kevin Magnussen is probably not even on any sort of high fuel, runs. Obviously, it's different to every team. You'd want one person to do this, one person to do that, split the days, and just slowly build up their areas where they're not great at. So maybe Kevin was bad last year at low, high fuel, high speed corners. You know, so it's going to be slower overall. It's hard to explain everything with testing. Testing's just a bit of a mess, but there is a chance now that Williams, with the limited laps that they have gathered some sort of data that they can use to push themselves that wee bit more now through this weekend. Because obviously, as we know, testing sometimes, as we can see for the first race of the season, generally predicts the winner of the race. So I would not be surprised if Max wins, even though it was the Ferraris setting the fastest times. But let's be honest, we all know that Red Bull is hiding something scary. Like, we thought last year that the Red Bull being 20 seconds ahead at the end of the race was crazy. It could be a whole minute this time. Max doing laps around everyone else. Bye bye, Ferrari. See you next year.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think the total testing laps, I think it does paint a picture of teams that were focusing mainly on long runs, because going into the weekend, Haas were very much going along the lines of, we're not even going to set qualifying laps here. We're just going to do as many laps as we can to try and work out the tire issues. Hence why they ended up with the most. And, that's what they're focusing on. And that's probably the area which they need to improve on the most. So for them, doing 441 laps is just as beneficial as Mercedes doing 360, where half of them might have been qualifying laps. Where, in the space of the time Haas could do 3 laps, it's a out lap, a fast lap, and an in lap for Mercedes. They don't always count like that. So yeah, we can't really read in too much into tests in the first place, let alone the amount of lap times, but it does give us some indication of how reliable cars are, because generally speaking, if your car's working, you'll be out on track more, and therefore you'll do more laps. And for Haas to do 441 laps with no real major issues, I think it's a credit to them that they've built a reliable car. It's just they now need a fast and reliable car, which I think was what Mercedes were going with. Was a couple of seasons ago where they had a reliable car but didn't have a fast car, and Red Bull have a fast and reliable car. So we'll see how, as you say, how far ahead they will be come the end of the Bahrain Grand Prix. But to go quickly back to the point we made at the start about Ferrari potentially being Red Bull's biggest rivals, someone who isn't here joining us tonight but has sent us a couple of videos discussing some of the topics we're going to be talking about is Tom Toseland, and here's what he had to say about Ferrari being Red Bull's biggest rivals.
Then I think with Ferrari, I think they probably are the closest competitors to Red Bull. Had some great race pace. Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez. Sainz was much quicker, and then obviously the fastest time of the test was set by Ferrari. Obviously, Red Bull probably holding back a little bit, so I don't think they'll be with Red Bull in the end. And I think it might be a battle between themselves and Mercedes. But Charles Leclerc has said that the Ferrari is one that can improve. It's got a good platform to improve over the season. So I think it's going to be one that we see maybe challenging Red Bull in the end of the year. Just depends how quick that Mercedes is, because I'm not sure they've shown their full set of cards to say. I think that's the same.
So going quickly back to the McLaren point that we were making before we heard from Tom, with McLaren being, looks like they're going to be not being necessarily down the back of the grid, but definitely not fighting for podiums like they were at the end of last season, at least based on testing. Ryan, how do you think that will affect the confidence of their drivers Norris and Piastri going into the new season? Because at the end of last year, they were able to really push and go for podiums, and obviously weren't able to go to race ones because of how good Verstappen was. But they had a car that, if Red Bull had any other driver in that car, that they could have been challenging for wins.
Yeah, for the likes of those two boys, I don't think there's any real doubts in the back of their heads at the minute. Come the end of this weekend, things could be completely different, but everyone knows, even the drivers themselves, you cannot rely on that, like, testing data. Yes, it gives you a good format to set you up for this weekend specifically, because obviously the race is at the track they've been testing at for the last 3 days. So they'll have a rough idea where they're at in their head for themselves, but they won't be able to compare that against the teams. Now, they look a wee bit disheartened at the moment. Confidence is a wee bit funny because the interviews, well, Piastri just essentially has a steel face most of the time anyway, unless he's actually won or being heavily praised or something, then he'll give it a wee, you get a wee smirk out of him. But Lando, he seemed not completely annoyed, but he just feels maybe himself that the car just isn't sitting right with him, or even Oscar for that same matter. It doesn't feel the same as how it did last year. So they think that the car is going to perform a lot worse, maybe slightly better. It's still too early to tell. For them, though, I would highly doubt that should be any thing in their mind, because they, as you said, they were challenging well and hard once they brought themselves back in the second half of the season last year, fighting away for podiums. Could have had a fair shot at a win, possibly at one stage, but that then just got yep, bye bye. They're definitely a fair chance that they're a customer team to Mercedes. If Mercedes can figure their stuff out, then they can figure their stuff out as well at McLaren. Because realistically, if it's all down to power's not hard to sort. Once the main guys figure it out, you're not going to be long behind. Or sometimes you get the likes of Aston Martin, who magically pull out of nowhere and just set out fastest laps. I'm talking about the start last year. And Mercedes is like, whoa, how did they do that? It's called no side pods, my friend. I mean, having side pods, my friend. Dang it. Yeah. Once again, go back to the point you made. Should it be confidence knocking for them? Never. They're set in stone, them boys. Well, Norris, he's experienced enough to know that testing doesn't mean anything, and that it may take a couple of races before they get settled into themselves. But everyone's in the same boat at this time of the year. The only team that should really be fearing anything is Red Bull, because they might think they have it in the bag, but they don't know. Ferrari could have been sandbagging just as hard as them.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, let's hear what Tom had to say about McLaren's reliability issues.
So I think McLaren, yeah, they did waste some time. I think obviously the fuel tank issues they had were not great, and the clutch issues obviously cost Lando Norris a lot of time over the third day of testing. So not great. Has lost them out a lot of time. But and again, they weren't at their strongest venue. They're at Bahrain. Andrea Distella said it's not a great venue for that car. So I mean, I don't think we can take everything from the testing for them, because I don't think it's realistically shown what they can do this season. I think it's just one of their bogey circuits. I think as well, Oscar Piastri has said that the car is good through the slow speed corners, so it's obviously shown improvement from last year. As we know, the car wasn't great for the slow speed corners. So I think, yes, there may be some issues early on, because obviously they haven't been able to test as much as they wanted to, but I think they're still in a pretty decent position to start off the season.
So one of the teams that really struggled during testing, along with the likes of McLaren, were Alpine, and it wasn't for reliability issues. It was just their performance just was not there. Their drivers, Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, were just really nowhere to be seen. And I've seen a lot of people saying that it could be the underrated team of testing, where they kept quiet and kept heading away. But during testing, you want to be making headlines for good reasons, and not making any headlines at all can sometimes be a bad thing, because no one really knows where they are in terms of anyone else, and not setting times that were right up there in testing is a slight worry. and they just don't look comfortable at all. Ryan, do you think this is going to be a challenging season for Alpine?
Well, if we take the team as a whole, Alpine is essentially Renault. Renault is French. The whole team is French. Their 2 drivers are French, and they're French. What are the French good at? They're good at making wines, breads, fashion. But you know what the French aren't good at? Making cars, and making cars go fast. Renault, Citroën, Peugeot. No, thank you. I'll pass. I feel bad for them, mainly because they're the team that we look at and we go, at the time when Daniel Ricciardo was with them and the magnificent yellow and black Renault, and I was like, this team could actually be something in a couple of years. They could actually be the sole the sole customer, not customer, the works team. They could be their own works team with their Renault power unit, and they could actually do something with it. And to see that they've now fallen even further back behind Red Bull, who took on Honda's engine development, I expected them to really be on top of things by now. As I said, they're French, so what do they know? It is disappointing, especially for the 2 drivers. Like, Esteban's been in the sport long enough, and Pierre took a gamble with the team, dropping out of the Red Bull family circle essentially, to join them. And so far throughout testing, and once again, I will preface, can't base anything off of testing, but you would like to have seen a wee bit more performance out of that car, especially in comparison to the rest of the paddock and the grid. You know, everyone else is finding wee bits and pieces of pace here and there, and you're seeing all the different testing methods being carried out, and then you're just looking at Alpine, you're like, what is going on? Why are they the new Ferrari? Do they really not know what's going on anymore in this sport? Hello, Circus 911. It seems that the Ferrari bandits have ran away and escaped into the French circus. Help. So I don't know what's going on down at Alpine, but hopefully they get it sorted out, because their car looks decent, but looks, as everyone says, looks can be deceiving.
Well, there's a reason it looks like it's got no color in the car, and that's because apparently it's extremely overweight, and that's a key issue that they're having. And I found the testing speed trap figures, and surprisingly, McLaren's top with 202.4 miles per hour.
That's good German engineering power unit for you.
followed by Williams, also Mercedes powered. Now, Williams
I'm just saying some.
Yeah. Now, historically, Williams have always had a car that's very fast through the speed traps. So I don't know how much you can read into this, because third is Haas. So yeah.
Okay.
But Alpine are down in 9th, with Mercedes above them, and then RB 10th. So we can't really look into that too much. It's speed trap figures that we don't really understand, because RB and RB have the same engines. McLaren have the same engines as Mercedes, who finished in 8th. So yeah, but it's stats, and if you're looking at that on paper, Alpine have the 9th slowest car.
Where's Aston?
Aston are 5th.
That's pretty decent, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really know what they mean, but it means something. At least they were reliable. That's the main thing for Alpine.
Yeah.
But earlier today, I asked Tom if Alpine were the biggest disappointment of the test.
Alpine aren't in a great position. I think they finished 16th and 17th over the times in testing, which isn't great for a manufacturer effort, but it is a whole new concept for their car. It's not the same car as last. Actually, that's pretty obvious, but there's a lot of changes to that car for this year. So I think it's just going to take time and analysis. Pierre, as I think, said he doesn't predict the car will be good earlier on in the season, but they do have some upgrades coming. I think it will be a bit like a McLaren situation from last year, where they just get quicker and quicker as it all goes on.
Okay, Ryan, so final point of discussion for this podcast. Who impressed you most during testing? For me, it was Ferrari. setting the fastest times, and they were just looking good during the entire test. And given I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Ferrari this year to perform because the spotlight's on them as one of Red Bull's challengers in the first place. But there's also the story of them trying to put themselves in a good position to allow Lewis Hamilton to join the team and potentially fight for titles. And I feel like that pressure is going to creep in later in the season. So I think they were keen to make a good start to the season. Although the Lewis Hamilton appointment or signing won't have an effect on how good this car was because this car was built halfway through that season. But there's still that whole mindset of we've got a 7-time world champion join the team next year. We need to look good. And also they want to give Carlos Sainz a car to basically prove himself as well. If they basically want to do what Mercedes done with Bottas and ensure he finds another spot on the grid, because like we said before, Sainz doesn't deserve to lose his seat at Ferrari. He deserves to be in F1. That could be with Audi, but even that's looking doubtful now, their involvement, but that's for another day. Ryan, there's a lot of talk about Red Bull being the team of testing because they're carried on where they were last season, and there's a lot of jokes as well at the start of testing where we know Mercedes had this Cirrus iPod concept which failed. Red Bull have built a car which looks to be heading in that direction. Do you think this is a Adrian Newey masterclass if this does work?
Of course it is, man. Of course it is. He's the man, the myth, the legend. The guy, as Ted Kravitz says, who sees air. He took that Mercedes and says, hold on, give me a second. And he looked at it. He trimmed off a few pieces. He slimmed it down, refined the edges, made it more aerodynamic, slim, trimmed, and refined. And this guy has cooked a masterpiece that sounds like R2-D2 hanging off the back wing, as everyone keeps saying when it's going absolute full pelt. This car is going to be unbelievable. Yeah, it's crazy. As I said earlier, at the start of last season, we thought them holding the 20-second gap in the first race was a bit mental. I am fearing to see what happens in this. If Ferrari can hang on to the tails of them, fair dues, because Ferrari were playing catch up at one point in the last season, so they were still developing hard on their own car just to sit high enough last year. So Red Bull essentially probably went 4 races and that'll do. Just carried out the rest of the season dominating. Maybe brought one package, I think, throughout the whole time. 1 or 2 actually, but they're only little minor aero tweaks. I'm honestly gonna be so shocked if they pull up to the first race and they aren't sitting on pole. Both drivers, if they're both not sitting 1 and 2 and race 1 and 2, there's something not right. As I said, you never know. Williams could be cooking up a masterpiece here and could come from the trenches and dominate everyone. Go back to 2014 when they brought in the new regulations and they just piggybacked off Mercedes. Come on, Williams, woo, we can do it. But that the Red Bull, man, I'm telling you, the team might be in a wee bit of a flurry at the minute with things going on in the background, but that doesn't matter. On-track performance is where it's at, and this car is going to be the be-all, end-all. Who cares about your 7th world title? I mean, your 8th world title. This is going Verstappen once again.
Yeah.
Also, not a Verstappen fanboy, just passionate, as Matthew Gallagher would say.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be an all season for Red Bull to be at the very front. But if we look at the pure data for testing, Haas are going to be world champions. So that's all we need to say.
I mean, boo! That's all Gunther Steiner's work. Why would you steal that from him?
Yeah. But yeah, before we go on to our predictions, which were woefully bad from preseason testing, as per usual, we're keeping up the standards that we've shown for the past 4 seasons. But yeah, let's hear from Tom about which team impressed him most during preseason testing.
Who impressed me the most? I think RB did. I think, not Red Bull though, the other one. Because I think they're the fastest of the non-fast 5, which is a good position to be in. Just behind Aston Martin, I think. And yeah, I think they're a quick team. Daniel Ricciardo expects points from them and Q3 appearances in the season as well. So I think it's a quick car. And I feel like they're going to have some really decent results this year for a team that isn't one of, as I've said, the Fast Five. It's one of, and it's actually, that's the other thing. It's ahead of Alpine. It's ahead of a manufacturer, and I think for a team like that to be ahead of a manufacturer is always good. So, yeah, with a decent driver lineup as well, I think they can have some good results, and it looked like a good test for them as well.
Right, Brian, it's time for predictions. Let's take a quick look back at last time, and it was, well, woeful. We got 1 point between the three of us, and that was Tom's with his vague prediction of Russell sets more laps than Hamilton. Now, I think we've agreed behind the scenes that we're just going to start the season fresh, because that was a kind prediction for us to give him in the first place.
Yeah, it's just testing.
Yeah.
We were just testing the predictions.
Yes, and yeah. But we'll go through them and then very quickly, because they are quite funny. All predictions I would say were decent predictions,
Mostly
based
reasonable.
on reasonable is probably the better word for it. Fastest driver, we all went for Max Verstappen, but it wasn't. It was Carlos Sainz. Most
Sandbaggers.
laps most laps I went for Williams, which obviously finished last. Ryan, you went for Kick Cyber, Steak, whatever you want to call them. And Tom went for Mercedes, and it was Haas, as we mentioned multiple times. Most laps, we haven't bothered doing the maths to work out which driver done the most, but I went for Albon, Ryan, you went for Alonso, and Tom went for Bottas. If either of us have got that, we may call for these points to be reallocated, but we're not going to bother doing that. Fewest laps, I went for Red Bull. Ryan, you went for Ferrari, and Tom went for Haas, which makes me feel less bad about my prediction about Williams being the most. And then our surprise, Ryan, you went for Ocon doesn't have a clean session. There was very few sessions apart from the track braking where we had an issue, which was surprising. It's one thing we actually really haven't touched on, which we'll not really discuss, but
Las Vegas.
it was a clean test apart from the track braking a few times, which I think just shows the standard of driving we have in Formula One, where these drivers are able to keep in the cars and perform well.
And Logan Sargent spun. Very typical. Very typical.
Yeah. And then Tom obviously got his prediction right, but we're going to bin that one off, because I think it's only fair that we start the new season fresh.
It's only fair we don't split the vote at this time.
Yeah.
If it comes down to a point again this year, if it comes down to a draw again this year, I will remember this a moment in time, and I will give him the victory.
Okay. I'm also checking the website that we used to check quite often during testing, Mazzaspin.com.
Is it still active?
It is. How many days has it since his last spin?
Well, it's been over a season, but so I'm gonna go 5/13.
816 days.
Oh my! It's been 2 years. I thought it was only a year and a half.
No,
damn man,
because
that's like 2 1/3 years.
Yeah.
Gee.
His last spin was Saudi Arabia in FP2, and I'm actually just watching the clip. Let me see what happened to him. He didn't do anything. He just had a minor spin on track. That's his last memory in F1. He's back winning though. He won, I think, the 24 Hours Dubai endurance race, something like that. So he's still racing. Ryan, let's go on to our predictions now. Back to the standard racing predictions. Pole position for the Bahrain Formula One Gulf Air Grand Prix, or the Gulf Air Bahrain Grand Prix, whatever way they want to call it for sponsorship reasons. As co-winner last year, I'll let you go first.
My blind prediction: Max Verstappen.
Okay. And for anyone who missed the last podcast, we have agreed that if Verstappen wins the first 3 races of the season in a row, we're banning Verstappen from all predictions because it's only fair for us. How bold did I be at the start of the season? Last year, I was very bold with these predictions, basically going the opposite of what you and Tom did, which backfired for me, apart from a late season run where I did catch up quite a bit.
Let me help you out here, okay? You have 2 options. You either pick either Ferrari driver or you pick Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I was thinking of going for a Ferrari car, but I feel like I'm going to play it safe and go
Get some
for
points.
Verstappen. Yeah. And which I'm also going for Verstappen for race 1. Are you agreeing with me on that one?
Let's rack 'em and stack 'em, boy.
Okay.
Although if Perez could
Podium.
pull off a blinder.
Podium. You can go first for podium.
So if Max is winning, stick Perez on there. And will their car be reliable to successfully do more than 40 plus laps? I think okay, maybe so. Okay, yeah. I will stick down Carlos Sainz.
Sainz.
I was gonna say Leclerc,
I'm
but
gonna go. I was going to do the same, but I'm going to put both Ferraris down.
You think Checo's lost his tequila touch?
I just feel like he might struggle at the start of the season. I don't know why. Usually Bottas does well at the season opener, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does actually. But not that good though.
No,
especially in a steak, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I was about to make a really bad joke.
Fastest lap, I'm going for Norris.
Fastest lap. You know what? Give it to Aston Martin Lance Stroll.
Okay.
Out of pity.
Ryan, it's time to shine with your random number generator. Cue the jingle we've created featuring Julian Simmons of UTV in AI form, which sounds nothing like him, and it's more American than anything, but anyone from Northern Ireland will know exactly who he is.
Now, on just another F1 podcast, 3 motorsport fans go head-to-head in a battle of terrible predictions based on a computer. It's time for Ryan's random number generator.
Take it away.
Okay, so up first is Richard. We will give it to you. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Number 11. Closest.
Perez.
11. Perez. Oh, nice. Because you haven't predicted him for anything.
I mean, is a DNF too much of a loose prediction?
It's really not, because realistically he should finish.
Okay.
He's in an Adrian Newey car. He should finish.
Perez DNF.
Damn, that's very hateful. That. Okay. I see where you're at. Okay. And then we land on, for me, once, twice, 3 times, number 56. Okay, 56. Yeah, 55. Oh, I have predicted him to be on podium, however.
Yes.
So, do we jump up one to the next highest number or the next closest number?
Yeah, go for it.
Which would be, well, that would be 5, 6, 7, 8 down to Mick Schumacher, which would be miraculously if he reappears. So we go up to George Russell. I think George Russell. Now I'm going to make this very specific so that I can make it as bold as possible here. He will top second practice. He will make it into Q3. And he will finish the race I was going to say top 6. I can say top 6 because I'm saying he'll top second.
That's
Yeah, that's pretty.
That's
pretty
bold enough.
yeah.
Yeah. But, well, we give our predictions. Tom has also sent us his predictions, so let's see what he has to say.
So, who is going to be pole position winner? Max, probably, let's be honest here. Then podium, I'm going to go Carlos Sainz. Has something to prove. Has to probably get some decent results. Has set the fastest times in testing, so probably should get a podium. George Russell in the Mercedes. Don't know the car's full potential yet, I don't think. And I think they're going to prioritise himself more this season. Mercedes going to let me say that again. Mercedes going to prioritise him more over the season than they are going to Hamilton, because, well, Hamilton's going to Ferrari. Why would you prioritise him? And then fastest lap will go Daniel Ricciardo, as I said. Expects to be in Q3 a lot, so it could be it's probably one that could set a fastest lap time just out of nowhere where you're not really expecting it. So I think keep an eye on that. And then surprise, they've given me Fernando Alonso, and I'm going to say he's going to DNF just because it'd be interesting, and I can't think of anything else.
So we've heard what Tom has predicted, and I think after hearing those, Ryan, I think you may potentially be leading this championship come a few rounds of the season if that's the way Tom's going to predict. George Russell for podium is an ambitious one, but not out of the realms of possibility. Daniel Ricciardo for fastest lap, however, with RB fastest, slowest on the straights, is an interesting one. But if it comes off, it's a great prediction. And the Alonso DNF is, again, it's like Perez. It's one of them. You can't really predict the DNF. But other than that, signs of the podium, fair. And Verstappen, pole and win, expected. So, interesting set of predictions. Definitely taking a slightly different approach than they did last year. Taking sort of a leaf out of my book where we swap places, I mean, Tom, this season in terms of making predictions. So, yeah. But Ryan, I think it's time we round out this podcast. Racing's back, the weekend competitive racing, after watching 24 hours of cars going around in circles, as people say, where effectively didn't really mean anything to the viewing public. Competitive action's back. Qualifying, I think, is for the first time we really get to see these cars to their true potential. How excited are you to see that? Obviously, it's a different format this weekend. Practices on Friday, qualifying's on Friday, and the races on Saturday. It's not a sprint race, but it's going to feel a bit like it, isn't it?
It's going to feel more like Monaco when they used to do practice on a Thursday. Everything's just going to be a wee day earlier than expected. I'm excited. Of course, there's a bit of excitement on me. Not as much as excitement as I would have had in previous years. And I think that's just because we're still hanging off the back of the whole Verstappen's just going to win it all. The copy-paste season. Yuck. But if the first race of the season surprises, well, then this, as I said, it could just grab a lot more eyes than usually gets, especially when things start to get heated, as in like an actual championship battle. So we could be in for a real treat this season, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, the first race, I think, is at 3:00, and then the second race of the season is it Saudi the second? Let me actually just double check that. Because Saudi Arabia is the second race of the season. It's also on the Saturday, 5:00 UK start time, and then we get into silly hours Australia on the Sunday at 4 a.m., followed by Japan at 6 a.m. back to back. Great fun. Brian, thanks for joining me for this podcast. Your final thoughts before we head to Bahrain, staying in Bahrain.
Cars go nyong, fans go woo. Prices for tickets, there you go. Red Bull fast car.
Yeah, I agree with that. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully, she said it's a good first race and brings loads of new eyes to the sport in a time where it really does need it. But yeah, once again, Ryan, thanks for joining me. Thanks everyone for watching or listening, whichever platform you tuned in on. And we hope you can join us in the next one. Goodbye.